I wish to take this opportunity to speak a little more about the dynamics of my sacrifice, because there is still contained within that an understanding which has mostly gone unrecognized and unappreciated. And it is a very big understanding. Hello, and thank you for coming to watch my video at the new time that I'll be doing, which is this exact time every Saturday, because that's based on the feedback that I got from you guys. So thank you for the feedback. That was very useful to me. Okay, starting as always, have you read this book yet? If you haven't, then you're being naughty. Make sure you do. It's available in paperback, in ebook, and in audiobook, and the links for that are below this video. If you would like to have a private channeling session with me, also below you'll see there is a link which goes to a inquiry form, which just gets the ball rolling, doesn't obligate you to an actual channeling session with me. My How to Channel course is very close to being finished now, so I will start providing a little bit more information about that going forward. If you enjoy this video today, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment, share, and like. Right, getting to the topic for today's channeling, I think a lot of you will be pleased to know that I'm going to channel Jesus again today. That was a popular request. I didn't even ask that, but still several people said, can we have more Jesus, please? So there was a beautiful synchronicity where somebody also asked about the importance of sacrifice. And of course, who better is there to speak about sacrifice than Jesus Christ? So the question today, is sacrifice a necessary part of the spiritual journey? Is sacrifice a necessary part of the spiritual journey? All right, and Jesus will be coming through soon. Greetings and thank you for the question. Is sacrifice a necessary part of the spiritual journey? This is an interesting question, and it's something that we would enjoy to answer. However, by popular request, Jesus has agreed to amalgamate with us once again and provide his perspective on sacrifice and the spiritual journey. And this is something that which we also are quite excited to hear. So, if you are ready, then we will make the connection, provide the orifice through which the energy of the Christ can pass through and the channeling can begin. Standing by. Thank you once again for inviting me to be part of this amalgamation and to share with the many lovely people who are comprising the audience. So to you that is watching, it is with great love and a sense of joy that I greet you today. So, shall we get into it? This is a very big question because it is so fundamental to the spiritual journey. So you are probably already sensing, just from the way that I have begun, that yes, sacrifice is a necessary part of the spiritual journey. However, perhaps not in the way that you understand it to mean. So, over the course of this channeling, you will come to understand it in a new way. Your perspective will shift, and the concept of sacrificing oneself will lose its bitterness, and you will instead be able to savor the opportunity and enjoy the sweetness of sacrifice when it is understood in this larger way. So, now that I have tantalized your taste buds, I will begin by speaking of sacrifice in the context of the one. As there is only one being, then there is no sacrifice. Clearly this is so, because it is just the one being that is experiencing itself. And so there is nothing which is not this one being. So there is nothing lost when one individuation of this greater being is compromised, is diminished, is even ceased to have a physical life. There is no loss because it is just this one being playing with the illusion. It is the theatre of the all, but the all is just the single being. And even when one of these single beings, these individuations, these illusory entities, illusory because the individuation which they experience is ultimately not real, and the ultimate realization of that entity will be the understanding that it is in fact the one and not a separate individuation at all. And at that point it will coalesce back in to the greater identity and cease to be. But there will not be a sacrifice in that event, because it'll just be this one being expanding in its self-realization, self-understanding in an experiential way. But if we bring down the understanding, so instead of speaking in the context of the larger being, the ultimate being, and consider the individuations, even when one of these individuations ceases to be, as in there is a extinguishing of its physical life, it continues on because the one is eternal. And as each of you is an individuation of this eternal being, then this is to say that you also are eternal. So there is nothing lost. There is only something gained. There is always growth, unending growth. And onwards and onwards and onwards it goes, regardless of the context in which one of these individuations was separated from its physical avatar. Inherent to that experience is growth. So the being itself has become more, and the one also has become more. It is impossible for either of these identities to have been diminished. So from this understanding, there can be no sacrifice. There is no sacrifice. But of course, I understand that the context of this question is in regard to the incarnation that you are experiencing right now at this moment. In that context, Is sacrifice a necessary part of the spiritual journey? And yes, it is. It is a necessary part of the spiritual journey. And you are already doing it, whether you realize or not. Let me interject here a breakdown of my own experience during my human incarnation. Because I was here for a single incarnation, and the sacrifice that I made is still not forgotten. And of course, I'm speaking about my crucifixion. My crucifixion still rings in the memories of the humanity being. And the point of saying that is to demonstrate the power of sacrifice. Sacrifice in the right context can literally shift the trajectory of an entire special group, as was the case with my own sacrifice. So it was very powerful. However, it's important for you to understand that I did not experience it as my own sacrifice, as in, why did this happen to me? And this is really the important perspective in regard to this question in the way that it is most commonly asked in the earth human field. Because the idea of sacrificing oneself, it has a taste of bitterness that I would prefer not to sacrifice myself. I ask this question, is sacrifice essential? Because I'm hoping the answer is that it isn't. So that I can achieve my spiritual nirvana without having to endure sacrifice. For my own experience of this great sacrifice that still rings now in the memories of the humanity being, there was something very valuable in it for me as well. As I was a higher density being that requested an incarnation into the earth human cycle so that I could be of service, I was born into the incarnation still very much in possession of the fundamental qualities which are absent from the special group of the earth human. And this is a realization of my connection to the One, a realization of my connection to all other aspects of the special group, and also my realization that I am the light and nothing but the light. Because for the most of the cosmos, this is the default mechanism by which special groups are born into existence, already in possession of those fundamental understandings. So what is occurring in your solar system is incredibly unique, and it is a highly coveted experience, because what a great joy it is to be born without those fundamental understandings, but then through a process of ongoing incarnations, passing through a gauntlet of darkness to arrive at the realization of these fundamental truths and understanding them in a way which no one else can outside of this solar system, because you understand them experientially. Whereas for the rest of creation, it is understood conceptually, because they were already born into that state. They do not know what it is like to not be in the possession of those fundamental understandings. And so they do not have the experience of realization of those fundamental understandings. This is a highly coveted experience, to have that realization. And during my incarnation, I also wished very strongly, with great desire, to have that experience. Yet, because of the dynamics by which I was birthed into the earth human experience, already in possession of these fundamental understandings, in the most part, I was still slightly dichotomous, meaning that there was still the potential that I could experience the darkness. However, I really never did, because I was so skewed to the light. But this potential that lay within me, although latent, was the doorway to a grand gift, a beautiful endowment that I received from the One. Because during the process of my sacrifice, my crucifixion, which I had co-manifested with those that had participated in it, I realized that for me to experience the darkness so that I could have the sensation of being separated from the One, of being separated from my fellow humans, and also to experience a spiritual dichotomy, that it would require great suffering to an extreme degree for me to be able to make that separation so that those experiences could be had. And so, through co-manifestation, this is what occurred. And very briefly, I indeed had those experiences. I was separated from those fundamental understandings. And I truly appreciated and understood what it means to be an earth human being. And my understanding of all of you expanded exponentially, because until then, I had not experienced what you experience every day. And even though my love for you was profound, I did not understand you the way that I understand you now. So that moment, although it was at the point of my greatest suffering, was also the moment of greatest beauty in my earth human experience. It was the moment of greatest blessing. It was when I received the greatest gift. God, why hast thou forsaken me? This was my moment of separation. This was my moment of spiritual dichotomy. And in that moment, I understood you in a way that I could not before. And then the treasures continued to pour onto me, because I was able to transition from this state of separation, losing my possession of those fundamental understandings, to being reunited with them, to once again feeling my connection to the One, to each of you, and also shifting back into a state of spiritual unity comprised entirely of the light. So, this also is a highly coveted experience, which is on the horizon for humanity as it approaches the ascension. I had my own ascension. And so the spiritual myth of me rising into heaven, this is the metaphor of my ascension. As it shall be yours. You shall also ascend. So, as you can see, although it was an incredible, difficult sacrifice, contained within that sacrifice was something very meaningful and powerful for me as an individual and for your entire spatial group. This is the power of sacrifice. And before I continue on, I wish to take this opportunity to speak a little more about the dynamics of my sacrifice, because there is still contained within that an understanding which has mostly gone unrecognized and unappreciated. And it is a very big understanding. During the process of my crucifixion, I went from a state of being connected and in possession of those fundamental understandings to the low point where I was separated and lost possession of those fundamental understandings. And then I was reunited with those fundamental understandings. This later part of that journey was my demonstration to the humanity being, all those aspects contained within, including you who is watching this now, that it is possible to transition from a state of disconnection, not realizing you are connected to the one, not realizing you are connected to each other aspect of the spatial group, and not realizing that you are the light and nothing but the light, to transition from that state to a state of realizing you are connected to the one, realizing you are connected to each other, realizing you are the light and nothing but the light. I have done and demonstrated what will be the culmination of your time as a third density being. I have proven to you that it is possible, that your ascension is something which you also can achieve. This is the largest nugget of that iconic story, which is still not as appreciated as perhaps you could say I would like it to be. And so I'm very grateful for this opportunity to convey that to you. So, now we have established that sacrifice is meaningful, it is powerful, and it is something which should be part of your spiritual journey. And it is something which already is part of your spiritual journey. However, perhaps it is unrecognized. So let us discuss how it is in your life, how it can be part of your life, how it should be part of your life, and how it's probably something which is an aspect of life which you do not recognize. The journey to the light is a journey of service to others. And so service to others is necessitating that you give of yourself in some way. You give your time, you give your energy, you give your resources, you give your wisdom. And in doing this, then there is going to be occasions, there are going to be dynamics where you have less so that they may have what it is they require. This is sacrifice. However, it is experienced as love. Just as in my moment of greatest sacrifice, when I understood you in a way that I never could before, I did not experience it as sacrifice. In those moments, I experienced it as love. As my love for you, as my love for humanity, as my love for the earth being, for this larger organism, for my love of the One. And this is how you are experiencing much of your sacrifice also. What have you sacrificed for your children? What have you sacrificed for your partner? What have you sacrificed for all those that are important in your life? You give to them knowing that you will have less. You give to them knowing that you will have less opportunity. It is sacrifice. It is also service to others. And it is you demonstrating your love. If you are going to be on the spiritual journey, choosing the philosophical pathway of light, then your service to others orientation, which is inherent in that choice, is going to include sacrifice. And the more service to others you are oriented, then the more sacrifice it will entail. But you are beginning to understand that the wisest way to do it is not to call it sacrifice, but instead to call it a demonstration of your love, a recognition that in all others shines the same light, the light of the One. In each other aspect can be found the same love, the love of the One. And so it is not sacrifice, it is instead love. It is wise living. It is the spiritual journey. So, if you are pondering this concept of sacrifice and what you are propositioning yourself to do feels like an immense sacrifice, like I am prostrating myself on the ground so that I am victimized as a demonstration to the One that I am prepared to be the mistreated victim so that others can be pushed further in their journey. This is unnecessary. This is a perspective which is self-indulgent. It's unnecessary to perceive it in that way. It is narcissistic. It is focused on oneself and elevating oneself by this status of victim. And in doing this, the potency and also the spiritual expansion that one can gain from sacrifice is lost. because it is not done as a sense of service to others, although that is the outcome, but the energy of it is service to self. I will inconveniently sacrifice myself. I will prostrate myself. I will be the victim so I can righteously parade myself. This is misunderstanding, and it defeats the purpose. Although the net outcome may be good for those that are in benefit of your actions, for you personally, it is not beneficial. So, if you are going to sacrifice yourself for others, let the pervading energy be that of love. That your desire for them to have what they do not have, for them to receive what you would wish them to receive, is motivated entirely by your love of them, by your recognition that they are an aspect of the same being that you are. And so it is self-care. It is one aspect caring for another aspect of the same being. So you are self-caring when perceiving them from this expanded identity that you are the same being. But it is when you perceive them as separate from you and you are doing things for them, that person over there that is separate from me, this is when you will be caught in the mental trap of sacrifice, of victimhood, of self-martyring. Because you are not separate from them. You are the same being. And so it is self-care. And if it is self-care, then it is love. Sacrifice is also a part of the philosophical path of darkness. But the fundamental difference between sacrifice in the context of darkness and sacrifice in the context of the light is that in the light, sacrifice is sacrificing oneself for you to have less so others may have more. And of course, in the expanded context, those others are not separate, they're not others at all, they're actually just part of the expanded identity. They are you. However, and therefore, it is an act of love. However, in the philosophical path of darkness, sacrifice is the sacrifice of others, because it is service to self oriented. And so one does not sacrifice themselves for another being, because the service is always to self. The service is never to others. And so the power of sacrifice is still appreciated in the polarity of darkness. So it is others that are sacrificed. And the sacrifice is used in multiple ways. So the religious tenets, the ritualized processes and ceremonies of the darkness includes literal human sacrifice. Because darkness is a power. And this is something which has been discussed before in these channeling sessions. So just to briefly reiterate this concept that darkness is a power. When one is willing to go into darkness more than their opponent, then they are more likely to defeat their opponent when all things are equal. So for example, if there are two rival gangs and one gang is willing to beat up their opponents, but no more than that. That's the extent of the darkness which they will go into. But the other gang, that is their rival, they are willing to kill the members of this other gang. And not only kill them, but also, if it's required, to kill entire families to really send the message. And this gang that is willing to only beat are not prepared to go that far into darkness. And so they recede. They give up their territory because they do not want to be part of that. And so this more violent gang now prevail. They now are the most powerful. And it is their willingness to go into darkness which is the source of their power. And so in this context, darkness is power. And so at the very extremes of power on your planet, those that are in the positions of greatest authority, power, wealth, control of your planet are beings that have positioned themselves there in the engineered society and trained themselves to be the darkest beings on planet Earth. And this is something which is not achieved just by conscious decision. I wish to be evil so that I can do these things. At this extreme level, as you can imagine, with extreme athleticism, one cannot just show up on race day and run and expect to win. They must spend their time conditioning themselves. So when they arrive on race day, they win because they are so conditioned. They are so match ready. They are so fit and prepared to be the most competitive. So at this upper level of control over your planet, those that are at the very pinnacle of darkness and therefore the pinnacle of power appreciate they are there because of their capacity for darkness, and that there are many challengers who wish to usurp them and also have an appreciation of the power of darkness. And so to maintain this ultimate position at the pinnacle, one must be continually conditioning themselves into darkness, to be match ready with darkness. And so this ritualized ceremonies, the tenets of their religion, literally have processes which have the sole purpose of generating maximum darkness in the most efficient way over the shortest amount of time. And this is achieved by sacrificing the most innocent, the most pure, those within the earth-human field which are most in a state of spiritual unity, because they have not been yet corrupted and confused by the system to become increasingly spiritually dichotomous, meaning that identifying more and more and more as the darkness. And who are the most innocent? Who are the most pure, the most beautiful in spirit? It is children. It is the young. It is those that are chosen to be part of this sacrificial process. Because by sacrificing the most innocent, the most vulnerable, the most spiritually pure and beautiful, and making them suffer in ways which are grotesque, that the greatest degree of darkness can be generated. And so, in a compressed way, they can draw into themselves and their alliances the greatest degree of darkness, and therefore the greatest capacity for power through darkness. And also, sacrifice is also used to summon greater dark intellects. The being which is following the philosophical path of the light are given access to the infinity of the One as they expand into their own infinity, becoming more an extra-dimensional being, contained less in the avatar and more in what lie beyond the avatar, in this infinite aspect where all wisdom is contained. And so those beings that are choosing the philosophical path, they do not require hierarchy. They can access the greatest, most profound wisdoms of all creation through their own personal connection to the One, which is through the proxy of their own infinity, because they are the One. However, those that have chosen the philosophical pathway of darkness, they have deliberately shut themselves off from this connection, because this connection is imbued with the qualities of the One. And the qualities of the One, when an individual has chosen the philosophical pathway of darkness, are debilitating, are inhibiting, are a constraint on the fulfillment of ambition. Because if you hold love, empathy, sympathy, compassion, then that is a limitation to what you're willing to do to those that will be victims of your agenda. Therefore, one cannot be imbued with the energy of the One, so there is a shutting off. Which means there is no potential for accessing the wisdom of the One through the proxy of their own extra dimensionality. But still, to be competitive, to have advantage, to get the upper hand, they require access to an understanding, a perspective, a intellect which is beyond their own. And so they summon dark intellects which are not of the human field. They summon greater intellects which have also chosen the philosophical pathway of darkness. However, these beings are also service to self beings. They are unwilling to give of themselves without something in return, because they do not personally sacrifice, because personally sacrificing is not a tenet of service to self orientation. It is not part of the philosophical path of darkness journey. So, if they are to come and to provide a perspective, an understanding, a strategy to those that are at the pinnacle of darkness power on earth, then they want something in return. And what is it that they want? They want darkness. They want more power through darkness. And so the only thing that will satiate them and bring them into the reality of those that are seeking this higher perspective is an offering of great darkness. And again, using a very similar process, the demon is summoned, it could be said, by sacrificing the most innocent, the most vulnerable, the most spiritually pure, the most beautiful. So understand, on your planet for a very long time, there has been an industry which exists solely to supply innocent children for these processes. Because it is not just one group that participates in these processes. There are several who compete for domination of the planet and occasionally will cooperate to achieve an agenda which serves them both. And the sacrifice of children is part of their methodology. But this is not reason to hate them, because it's important to maintain the perspective that this is just the theatre of the illusion. The one wishes to know itself to completion experientially, which means that all experience is relevant. And these dark beings, in reality, are the light and nothing but the light, because they are also an individuation of the one. And so when their current incarnation is concluded, they will return to the one as a being fully realized of themselves as the light. As beautiful as you will be, as pure as you will be. They are just playing a role. And so they, from this expanded aspect, are still deserving of your love, because they are still an aspect of this one being. But although they are grotesque and hideous and evil to the extreme, they are making a great sacrifice for you. Because in the high self perspective, they are the being of light. And they realize that by following the philosophical pathway of darkness in this incarnation, then they are very, very, very unlikely to be compatible with the energetics of ascension. And so they shall not ascend. They were aware of this before they made the choice to be born into circumstances where it was very likely that they would follow that philosophical path. So why did they make that choice? Why would they do that? It is because they love you so dearly, so sincerely, that they have made this sacrifice. Because they also understand that for humanity to find its way into the light, there must be a repulsive force so strong that it shoots humanity like a cannon into the light. And of course, as it is a polarity, there is only the light and the darkness, then the repulsive force strong enough to catapult humanity into light so that it may ascend is the darkness. A great force of darkness. And so they have decided, from their love for you and all of humanity, to sacrifice themselves by giving themselves to the darkness to create this force which is powerful enough that humanity can ascend and shift into the next paradigm of what it means to be an earth human being. This is an epic sacrifice, because they will be recycled back into the third density experience. And it may be many, many, many thousands of years before the opportunity coincides with their incarnation cycle again to ascend. That is the immensity of their sacrifice, which is a demonstration of their immensity of love for you. And there is one more sacrifice which I would like to speak of. And that sacrifice is ahead of you. It is something which is on the horizon, just now beginning to take shape. One of the final catalytic events within the Earth human experience, which will catapult humanity's awakening and begin the energetic cascade which leads all the way to the ascension event, will be the passing of many human beings alive right now over a short period of time. There are many that have made the decision from the higher self perspective to sacrifice themselves such that the rest of humanity can awaken and move into the cascading, energetic part of the ascension process, the prelude. One of the great frontiers still misunderstood in the Earth human field is the understanding of death. The realization that one is infinite, that there is nothing lost because you are invulnerable, you are immortal, and therefore death is not something to be feared. And when the fear of death is released, there is a shift into a state of spiritual freedom and fearlessness, which opens the gates for an explosion of light from all of the chakral centers. And this will accelerate the polarization to the dark, the polarization to the light, and the purging of the darkness. This will be a profound shift. For this understanding to enter into the humanity being consciousness, it will require a scenario of many humans passing over in a short period of time, in an unexpected way, over the entire planet. I do not wish to elaborate because I do not wish to fill you with fear and dread. But I can sense there are some of you who are watching that fully understand what it is that I'm saying. And that will be the final sacrifice of the third density experience for each of the aspects of the humanity being. So, yes, sacrifice is fundamental to your spiritual journey. And it is not something that one should avoid, but rather it is something that one should, if inspired to be self-sacrificial in some way, to view through the lens of love. So it is not a bitter sacrifice of oneself, but instead it is a rewarding gesture of love, of a understanding that the philosophical pathway of light is a journey of service to others. And this service to others is done through a motivation of love. And therefore, that is why I do it. For the satisfaction that I receive, and also for the fulfillment of divine purpose by furthering the humanity's being's shift into the light, so that there can be these realizations which lay ahead. I am very excited to see you make this journey. And I have been blessed with the experience of having these experiential realizations of connection to God, connection to each other aspect of the spiritual group of which I am a member, and also of my constituency as the light and nothing but the light. I was blessed with my ascension in that way. And I must say now to you that it is a quality of experience which is like no other. It is incredible. And all those outside of the paradigm of your solar system, your experience, are wise in their coveting of that experience. Because it is as fulfilling, as expanding as they all assume it is. And soon it will be your experience. And so my heart is filled with joy to witness the excitement and the love and the happiness which will flood from you when that point has been crossed. Thank you for being here and for giving me the opportunity to speak on this concept of sacrifice, which was very centrally thematic to my own life, and allowing me to provide a perspective which is perhaps different to the way that sacrifice and my sacrifice is viewed within the cultural context of your planet. I am very grateful for that opportunity. Jesus has left the amalgamation, and in doing so there is still quite a strong echo of love within the group being that we form in these channeling sessions. We give thanks to Jesus for coming to share his perspective, and we give thanks to you also for accepting him into our co-experience. Thank you, and we love you.